Hello and welcome to this video. My name is Barry Beckham and the subject here is making great cutouts with layer masks. Now I've talked about the techniques we're going to cover here on two other videos. One of them was the layer blending, when I used the technique to colour in the sails of the sailboats. The other was the montage, where I needed to remove the statue from its background. Although I didn't describe in detail how I did that, I referred you back to the sailboats. But what I'm going to do here is just take you through the process to make sure that you understand exactly how it works and how quick it is, because it does open up a lot of possibilities, and quite often a manual selection or a manual cutout works better than any of the automated tools. Now, as you can see here, I've got this image opened up in Adobe Camera Raw. I've done my basic editing here, but you will notice that because the red car was shot on such a sunny day with blue sky, I've got an awful lot of blue in the chrome. So to make my cutout work a little better when it's actually cut out, I'm going to use Camera Raw to assist me. For example, if we zoom in, let's say, on the chrome around the headlight, I'm going to go to my hue, saturation and luminance sliders. And in the saturation here, because the car's red, if I take off the saturation of the blues, you can see I can return my chrome to absolute black and white. Or if I just wanted to leave a hint of blue, I could do that. The choice is yours. I'm going to take all of the colour out of that. I'll hit Control 0 and you will see the effect. It doesn't really affect the car overly much, if at all, but it certainly affects the chrome. It makes the background look a little bit odd, but we're going to remove that anyway. So I'm happy now to move on. I can open this up into Photoshop and apply a layer mask. When the image opens up on screen, you may notice that I've opened this up as a smart object. That's just out of habit. I don't think we actually need it here. So I'm going to go to the right of my thumbnail, right click and rasterize the layer. Just take a little bit of pressure off my computer. Straight away I'm going to go down and add a layer mask. From the toolbox we're going to want black, a standard soft edge brush, and I want my opacity at 100% and I need the flow at 100%. Then we need to zoom in and decide exactly where we're going to start. So let me zoom in somewhere around there. We'll get the image quite large on screen, because the more trouble we take with the mask we're about to make, the better the end result. My brush is far too big, so I'm going to use the square bracket keys to reduce the size of the brush to something around that size. I may have to adjust it slightly as we go around the car, but it looks okay to me at the moment. So we can make a start right where the windshield meets the edge of the car here. So I'm going to make a start on the edge here. Remember the technique. We click. You can just about see that we've made a hole in this image, and we can see the start of the blue and white checkerboard underneath. Holding the shift key and on straight edges, I can move quite a distance and I can paint between two straight lines. We seem to have a little bump around the car there. We'll pick that up, and then we're riding, I think, up the bonnet. I'm using my spacebar to click and drag, because you can see how quick I can actually get around this car to make this cutout. Now, I don't intend for you to stay with me for the entire time, but what I want you to do is to get a feel for the fact that it's not a really lengthy job to do. Shorter steps as we go around those curves. When we get to things like this, then we can probably slow down and do the indentations down the chrome there. And there are times perhaps when we may want to actually reduce the size of the brush just a little bit, so I can just tap it down a bit if I thought it was a bit too heavy, but click, click, step out and down, step out and down. You can see even this isn't that tricky, and the more you do this, the easier you'll find it. Now sometimes you'll get to spots where you may find it's a little difficult to see. Don't worry, just zoom out, or if in doubt, take it anyway, because we are working on a mask and there's no risk, as you know, when we're working with a mask. So as you can see, in the short time I've been talking, we've actually got quite a long way around the car. Certainly it's not going to take us all night to cut the car out, and we're going to have a superb cutout when we've done that. Now I'm going to hit Control 0 just for a moment, because when I come down the edge here, when I originally cut this out, because I have done this before, I chose to take the shadow with me, because the shadow can be quite important when we start to put the image together a little bit later. But the technique is just to go around the outer edge of the whole thing, all the way around, and it will probably take half an hour. Not forgetting, of course, we do have a few little bits and pieces in the windows, because we don't want anything through the windows showing through the car. Now, with the spinning round of the screen, at first glance you may not even notice that I've actually gone ahead and completed the selection all around the edge of the car. But if I zoom back in, you can clearly see that I've done just that. No different to what I described just a few seconds ago, all the way around the car. Remember, there is no risk because we're working with a mask. But now we can take a look at the mask in isolation. If I hold my Alt key and I click the mask, there we can see the actual shape that we need to deal with, because everything around the outside for a start needs to be black to remove all the background. So let's do that first. We can pick up our magic wand tool to do that. Click and it selects it nice and easy. Let's zoom in on the edge and make a determination. How far do we want to expand this selection? Well, it's not far, is it? I reckon about 1 pixel. We can actually see the pixels here. So let me go to Select, Modify, Expand. I'll choose 1 pixel. I'm just moving across the soft edge which was caused by the brush to make sure that when I flood all that outer area, it's going to do a good job with my cutout. So black is my foreground color. Alt backspace. There we have it. Let's hit Control D, and before I do the little bits and pieces like the windows and the little bits inside the shadow, let me turn back on the thumbnail so you just get a feel for where we've got so far. So all I need to do is much the same with all the other parts. Alt key, click the mask. I can zoom in to make it a bit easier for myself, but if I click around and just add one selection to another, as you can see, it doesn't take too long. I seem to have one there, one there, one there, one there. I know that I need to expand that selection 1 pixel, so let's modify, expand 1. Alt backspace to flood, Control D to remove the selection. There's a cutout we've got done, apart from one little bit that I've just seen that I've missed down there. Don't worry about that, those things are going to happen. Select, modify, expand 1 pixel, Alt backspace, and now we should be done. Now when you first start doing this sort of thing, yes, you're going to be a bit slower at it than I was just now. Well, you've got a layer here and a layer mask. So you can do 10 minutes, 15 minutes. When you feel you've had enough, you can save it, come back another day. And if you're going around areas of the car which you would like to have at a different angle, sometimes that's quite useful, go to your hand tool, select the rotate view tool, and you can rotate your car into any angle you like. So if you felt it was a lot easier to do these edges from that angle, then you can do so. Anytime you want to get the car back to its right orientation, just double click the tool in the toolbox, Control 0, and there we are back. With the spinning round of the screen, here you're viewing a slightly different version, exactly the same cutout, but here I decided to remove that strong shadow underneath, because where we go with a piece of work like this is going to be purely personal. We've got the cutout made, and here are a couple of options that I did consider at some stage. We can put the image over another image, of course, but the one thing we must remember when we make a cutout like this, without a shadow underneath the car, it almost looks like the car is levitating above the ground. So if you just make a selection on a new blank layer, flood it with black, soften the edge, and then just reduce the opacity, you can create a shadow that's going to do something like this, and it can be as dark or as light as you need. We can also put in gradients in the foreground, which sometimes help. And with the background I've produced here, you can see I've also done a little bit of lightness behind the car, so it shows up around it almost as though there's a light underneath. There's an enormous number of things you can do once you've got your cutout made. The important part here is getting that cutout really well done. So here we have another example of exactly the same techniques. Maybe we could argue this car is a little bit more of a complex shape, but nothing that we cannot handle by just using that shift click method and a layer mask. As you can see here, I've applied the layer mask to the car, so the layer mask is long gone. But if I just turn everything off here, you can see that I've got a sky shot as the foreground. I've got the shadow underneath the car and a little bit of a gradient at the top just to hold things in. And if I were to zoom in on the car, I hope you'll agree the cutout is extremely good quality. It will certainly stand up to scrutiny with quite a large print. Now over the years I've used this layers cutout technique using a layer mask and actually making the cutout manually more times than I care to remember. But still, even today, with all of the automatic tools and semi-automatic tools we have, in many cases I still find myself reaching for that soft edge brush and a mask, because I know the end result is going to be just that bit better. And I also like the flexibility that I get working in layers. For example, here white is my background color. I've got my sky layer selected there. I can flood that with white with Control Backspace, and we've got a different picture instantly.